Thanks everyone for joining us for this number 6. Our 6th just an hour session this semester. And today we've planned something a little more, not that any of our sessions have been casual, but something we hoped would be a little more casual and maybe just fun as well as helpful for all of us here. But before we start, we usually have a couple of announcements, and we'd just like to share a couple of really exciting recognition announcements. Cristobal Rodriguez was recently appointed to Biden's President's Advisory Commission on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Hispanics. So he's part of a very distinguished set of folks from a variety of different backgrounds, organizations, and I think even industry, who are going to be serving on this commission. So that's really exciting. And also Amanda Tashini, who keeps popping up in our announcements because she's really getting a lot of recognition and really engaged in a lot of different things recently. She has just received the Association for the Study of Higher Education Outstanding Book Award for her recent publication. The book's title is Native Presence and Sovereignty in College, Sustaining Indigenous Weapons to Defeat Systemic Monsters. Title that I really love. She's going to be speaking about her book at the General ASHE Conference in November. And stay tuned because we're planning to have her do a conversation about the book. I believe the date will be in late November, right after Thanksgiving. So we're really looking forward to that here too. And just a couple other announcements, a reminder that our Learning Futures Collaborative around learning and educating across refugee immigrant networks has been holding a series of events. Their next one is coming up on October 19th. And they have a third one on November 15th. You can see the topics in the announcements. I think they just sent around an announcement about the October 19th session, the title Belonging for Refugee and Immigrant Students soon. So hopefully you can take advantage of one or two of these and learn a little bit more about the issues and hopefully what the LFC will be doing. And just one more, Knowledge Enterprise has an ongoing set of webinars. I guess we could put in the chat the link. The next one coming up on the 11th, that is during fall break, but we don't really have fall break. But the topic sounded to me really relevant for some of us. It's effective messaging before writing a proposal. And that seems to be including messaging and talking to program officers, to talking to potential collaborators. So it sounds like it will be a really useful session. So
Betty, just to add to that, so even if you can't make the particular event, if you actually go and register, they will send you a link to the recording of it so that you can watch it at your leisure. So there is a value to just going ahead and registering for the event, and that way you get on their listserv and they send you the links, so you can watch it at your convenience.
Great, thanks, Punya. And just one other quick announcement, there will be no Just an Hour next week. That's October 14th. Just an Hour will be on fall break. So we will be convening again in 2 weeks, and we'll announce the topic at the end of this session. So Punya, do you want to kick us off with the topic for today?
Sure. So, this is a conversation that Betty and I were having the other day. I had been speaking with some faculty member as they were writing their narrative for promotion tenure, and they were concerned that they were over the limit by like half a page. And in like 30 seconds, I generated a full page for them to fill up because all I did was change the font from Ariel to Garamond. And then we had this really big laugh about like how these things that we do in academia to, just make things fit, so Betty and I thought that, because fall break is coming up, we wanted something which would be fun and interesting. So we thought, there are lots of tips and tricks that we have all figured out in our careers as we go through. And we thought it might be fun to share. And so Clarence created a survey. And so people have shared a lot of tips and tricks. So I'm going to put a link to that doc there. But we thought we could just have like an open conversation about things that, and you can add to that list or you can skim that list. But what has worked for you in terms of, just surviving grad school, academia, all of that, all these challenges that we have. And yeah, I don't know, Betty, Clarence, if you want to add anything more to what I just said.
Well, I could just share a very recent example. We all know that saying no can be challenging. You don't want to hurt people's feelings or burn bridges or anything. So this example is from Eugene Judson. I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this, but we tried to invite a few people here to sort of who we thought might have tips or tricks to share. And Eugene also, as many of you probably know, has a good sense of humor. So I did email him to invite him. And in his response, he said, well, I'm going to have to apply the trick or the tip of knowing when to say no and turn you down for this session. And he went on to list 3 or 4 things that sounded very urgent and very time consuming, and then said, but I'm really looking forward to participating in the spring. So I thought it was great because he used a sense of humor. So instead of feeling upset, I was like, oh, okay. He made me feel badly for him because he had so much else to do. And then he made a vague offer of participating in the future and, giving us positive feedback on this. So it was a really nicely written message that was a graceful way, I thought, of saying no. So, and, that may be a place to start. If anyone else has ideas for ways to say no that feel better for you as the person saying no, and that you think will get a positive response from the person you're saying no to, I'd love to hear them, because that continues to be an issue. It's going to be an issue throughout your career. Or any other tips or tricks.
I'm wondering what people, I like your example. That was really interesting. And knowing Eugene, of course, he has to throw in his sense of humor, which makes it a little easier to palate. But also, sometimes I find if I give excuses or reasons, then it opens the conversation up for counter reasons why you could be able to do it. So I'm wondering if folks kind of fall into one of two camps, or do you always give reasons? Or lately it's like, I'd love to be able to do that. Sorry, I can't. And then, maybe in the spring or something along those lines. So I think there's a couple of approaches there. My other tip is sometimes I can't say, it's hard to say no, but just not saying yes right away helps me then consider and think about it. But anyway, I'm just wondering on others' thoughts.
Well, one thing I would add that I learned from Ida, because she repeated it in a number of the early career faculty sessions, was not using no, but saying not at this time. So can you do this? Not at this time. So it's not a direct no, it's, sometime in the future, maybe, but not committing yourself either. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know.
I also feel like, Betty, if somebody shot that back to me in an email, I would be like, so you can next month, you know what I mean? It almost would stump me, I think, to get that response back. So it might be a really good way to get out of it.
Well, the other thing, I think this was posted by someone in the survey is, well, I can't take on any more service until, say, I've got tenure, or, kind of giving a time in the future, that's far enough away perhaps that
Right.
person can't pin you down. So. Anyone else, or does anyone have situations where they'd like a tip or trick and would like to hear strategies to address it?
So one that, if I can jump in here, one that I added to the end, I think, of this document is this challenge, like when you go present at a conference and then somebody comes to you and says that, oh, this is so great, we would love to collaborate. And I never knew how to respond to that, because you don't know whether they're genuinely interested in doing so or not. And this I got from Chris Clark because he played it on me. And it's only after like 2 years I realized how nicely he had played it on me. And I thought that was a great solution, because effectively what you say is like, you show great excitement at the possibility of working together. It's like, oh, that's fabulous. Like, I'm so excited that you're excited by these ideas, and it seems like a great idea. And then you say, why don't you send me like a 1-pager or 2-pager with your ideas, and then we will follow up from there. And that actually 80% of the people never do that. They never follow up. And so the onus is now on them because they have indicated interest. Now the equation flips if it is somebody you actually want to collaborate with. So you're at a conference and somebody who's a big name in the field or something, who you want to work with comes and says that, oh, this is, there's an alignment here, maybe we can do something together. That's when you say, I will send you a 2-pager, then you put it on yourself, because that's something that you think that you'll get some value out of. Possibly, then not necessarily that it'll actually work out, but at least you're keeping the door open and you're being proactive. But I have found this to be a phenomenal way of being positive, but not even 80-90% of the time, people never get back to you. But they have a positive opinion of you because you responded to them in a positive way. It worked really well.
I think we need a tip or trick for getting people to speak up in just an hour sessions. Amy, you're muted, Amy. Did you want to?
Oh, no, I was reading, but I was kind of thinking about all of those no questions or answers and that, and I like them so much better. It feels like forever ago now, but Alfredo Artiles was one of my mentors, and he always said to me, no is a complete sentence. And I would always be like, but I need to not make the other person feel bad about me saying no. And he's like, no, you need to make sure that you don't feel bad about saying yes when you can't follow through or when it's too much for you. So in your mind, you always have to say no is a complete sentence and then go from there. Yeah.
So have you done that? Have you just said no to requests?
A few times, yes.
Mhm.
Say no, I can't. And if you say no, I can't, it, like Clarence said earlier, it kind of stumps people. Like they go, oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks. Anyway, maybe I can get back to you at a later time. And you said, sure, try that. But it typically, it stops people from asking you again and again. So when you said, in the spring, I would be the type of person that I would be emailing Eugene back to say, hey, I've got these dates in the spring. Which one do you want? And so I'm the type that I would keep following through until I got, the answer. So the no typically stops people from doing that.
Well, and I guess this isn't really funny, but it just makes me think, geez, if you don't give an explanation, people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, is she in treatment for cancer? Did her, mother just die? What happened? And they don't feel like they could ask.
Well, it's funny because we've had many, many conversations about this that, especially I think in higher ed, we feel like we should be able to do everything and all. And because I was laughing, I think that's where my hand went up. It said, when you're asked what courses you can teach, you just say, yes. And so we could teach all courses. Well, no, I can't teach all courses, or I probably could muddle my way through, but is that in the best interest of everybody? And so, no, it's not. And so I think in higher ed, we think we should be able to do it all. We want to do it all. We want to always be learning more. So we're going in all these different directions to extend, where then we so much overextend ourselves that it's a detriment to us and everybody around us. So I think that feeling confident with saying no and just saying, I can't do that, is something that we need to get over. But on the flip side, I always want to know, I want to do something. I want to be involved in something. And someone says to you, well, not at this time, or no, you shouldn't do that. How do you pursue then? Well, I'm in my 50s. You can't tell me what I can do about my career. Without sounding rude like that, right?
Right.
But how to pursue things in a way to say, why do you think this is not a good fit for me? Why do you think this is not a good choice? What's the reasoning behind this, without sounding whiny and obstinate, I guess.
Sure. So I'm just wondering, there's another bunch of emails that we often get is from students who want to, join the PhD program or want to do a postdoc with you. What is your sort of response to that?
This kind of goes in line with having this Google Doc that's some standard responses, because that is one that you will waste time. I don't want to say waste, but spend a lot of time. And so I have a standard, here's my research, here's what I'm looking for in students, here's some of the attributes, I've just outlined all of this, and it's just a copy and paste reply. And then it's fair to everybody, because here are my criteria. And that way I don't, and also it's laying out that once they've made it, through the application process, there will be college level interviews, but it's just, otherwise that can become a huge time sink. So I just have an auto reply to any inquiries like that. That's been, and it's only in the past, maybe year or two. And it's been extremely helpful.
I think this one hits for me too, because I get emails very often right now, especially because our faculty directory doesn't work, trying to help people find additional committee members. And while I feel very proud or happy that I know so much of the research interest and can make recommendations, I'm always oh, sorry, I'm sending 16 students your way to see if you can be on their doctoral dissertation committee. So I'm always wondering how that's received, if faculty have certain criteria for whether or not they'd consider sitting on a committee. So that's a interesting strategy, Leanna. And I don't know if you do for EDD students, I think you might have been on some lists I've shared lately.
That gets to my other thing is, should we, the strategy of, should you recommend somebody? And I know in some cases you have to, in this, oh, this might be a good person for your committee. but Willie is a great example because I love Willie and she's emeritus, but she gives everybody like my email and like, connect with Leanna. And it's like, stop, like, no, don't. I mean, just being mindful of if your no is always to suggest, maybe it's just not the same person. Maybe that's
Right.
what I'll say. Try to vary that because you're just moving it from your plate to their plate and just to be mindful of, you know, how you're distributing that workload. But yeah. And in terms of committee work, you know, I think if it's, I have served, I had an EDD dissertation defense today. And I think most faculty, if it's related to their research area, and especially if it has a someone who's chairing who I really know will get the students through and have work in a good, you know, kind of status, because not all chairs are created equal. I'll just say that. They're all great. It's some I think are stellar. So that sometimes plays.
That was a good move, Leon. I love that.
So
that's another tip or trick. Everybody's good, some are stellar. I like it. That's good. That's good. All right, so I'm going to ask another question here. So one of the things is like, all of us are like writing and publishing, and journals have these stupid things called word counts. Right? 7,000 words, whatever 1,000 words, like they have something there. So what are some best tricks for, you know, if you are like 500 words over? I have a couple that I use, but what's a good tricks that people have come up with? I'm just curious.
I think I was that tip or trick when I was a graduate student, because I had a couple faculty members that would send me things and say, hey, I need to cut X amount of words, your turn.
All right. So
I
that's
think
one
that
strategy.
was recently me. I sent something to Claren and said, I'm like 100 words over. Can you help?
I actually don't mind that. And I was not thinking of you, Amy. I was actually thinking when I was a student. So I don't mind, but great. Now I'm going to get all of you emailing me to help cut your words.
So you actually cut out words, Claren. Yes, this is.
Yeah. And I also love to like take a sentence that has 8 words and rewrite it with 4 or 5. It's like, I enjoy that type of work. Again, I'm just creating more work for myself.
And she's great at it. She's very good at it.
The number of
adverbs.
Number of hours I've spent rewriting a paragraph so that last 2 words are not hanging, because that gets me a line. You know, I can get half a page of prose in by just tweaking that. I can see Carla nodding her head away.
Just
very
eliminate,
much. I feel you on that for sure, Punya.
just eliminate some stuff and then put more research as required in the last paragraph.
There you go.
Do you remember? Does anyone
You can
remember
do it
word
just by
purpose?
reordering a word. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Just
Yeah.
flipping a word and gets that longer or the shorter word up, and then you don't even have to cut any words, and you can move the lines up, and you cut a whole page at the end of the paper.
Yeah, or like I would actually go in and like remove citations. You know, if it's like an non-essential citation, get rid of it and try to add all as many as you can, you know. But my favorite trick is if I have a table, the table goes in as an image, not as words.
The last several publications that I've submitted specifically said the tables had to be submitted as Word tables. So I think they're catching on to this. There's at least three of my more recent publications specified that they must be formatted as a Word table.
Dang.
So they're catching on to that trick.
Oh, that's evil. Yeah.
They caught on. I know. Well, I like with conference proposals, you know, along the lines of what Steve said, you know, more detailed findings will be described in the final paper, those kinds of things where you don't have room to actually go into detail.
Usually it is because when I'm writing the conference proposal, I have actually done none of the analysis. I just have some data, and I know by the time the conference comes along, I will. And so you have to write it in such a way that it gives the impression as if you know what's going to happen, but clearly you don't. So it is just walking that fine line without like lying, because you don't want to do that. So results will provide more insight into how blah, 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 right? So here is another topic, which I think can be quite contentious in higher ed, which is figuring out authorship. What are some strategies that people have come up with around that? Because nothing gets academics more worked up than feeling that they contributed more than somebody who was put ahead of them or whatever, right?
Don't write with people who are going to argue with you over that. That's one tip.
I think it gets particularly complex when you're working with doctoral students, because there is a power differential there, and which without you even realizing it may be problematic. So I'm just curious about how people have sort of talked about things like this or discussed this, or if you have faced a challenge like this.
I think, oftentimes I'll put other people first, and that's just my nature. But then like for tenure and promotion, you have to kind of be mindful. But I have gone through systematically at times with a rubric, because there were a number of students and we kind of had to decide. And so there are tools out there if you want to kind of a more systematic approach.
Oh, really? Like what are there, like
points of like who led analysis, who collected data, who who did the lit review, and kind of tallying. It's a way to divide it. So, and I think this was from a graduate class long ago, but it's been occasionally. We don't have to always use it, but if you're in a bigger writing group, sometimes it's helpful. So that's one strategy. But usually it's more of an informal conversation, and we do rotate. I'll say I'm on a team with Lauren Harris and Catherine Shelton, my former doc student, and we systematically rotate, and we rotate roles too, like taking lead on various studies. So that's another approach.
Yeah, I've been in spaces too that had that sort of like a tool or a systematic approach to, who did this point system. And we did it right at the beginning. It was with a senior faculty member, myself. I think it was my first year when I started, and it was a grad student. So it was just kind of a range of people in different stages of the academic world. But I think I think that they may be good in some situations, but I felt like it caused more of a uncomfortableness amongst us from the get-go of trying to rank like who's going to do what at the beginning, because life happened, and I had to jump in and step in for somebody to write the lit review, and the other person had to write the intro because of like an emergency that came on. So I think it's helpful at the beginning, but also like this informal conversation once we're sort of coming to the end of the manuscript, of just having a authentic, truthful conversation with each other about who contributed what, and also talking about how this is going to impact our trajectory of what stage that we're in. I mean, the senior faculty member that I was working with was really clear about putting himself as the last author because he wants to support our sort of trajectory. So that was a great experience that I've had.
So Liana, that when Matt and I, when we were doing our work, we actually had a footnote saying that we alternate authorship in our writing. We would have that as a note for when we had the authors, we'd have a note there. But also, again, Carlos, going to your point, we were also strategic about it, in the sense that I had started a year and a half before him, so I was going up for tenure before him. And so he was actually in the sequence to be first author, but that's the TC record piece. So he's, we talked and he said, no, Punya, you go first author on that. And then when the TPAC handbook was coming out, he's first author on that one because he was going up in 2 years, in a year's time. And so we were very strategic about it. And like the TPAC, I mean, there is a chapter which I'm first author on where actually he did a bulk of the writing. And the handbook chapter is a bulk of writing was by me. But I think we had developed such a nice sort of a trust and relationship with each other that we saw that our ships were rising and sinking together, and it worked out really well for both of us, honestly. But that's rare. I mean, sometimes these things can get complicated, and I have found it's better to have these conversations up front and then revisit if needed. Like Carlos, like you said, sometimes things change. You thought you would do X, you ended up doing Y, and then so revisit that.
I would just like to echo, I agree that it has been more helpful having those conversations up front so that people can invest what they feel is in line with what they said that their authorship was, but also being very clear about reserving the right to renegotiate in the case that situations change. One thing that has been helpful for me is that after making the decision for the plan for authorship is to put that on the front page and to actually make the title page first with the title and the authors. And that way, especially if you're on a Google Doc, the first thing you open up every time you open up that sheet is that you see, the author list and okay, this is the piece that I'm second on. And that is also helpful when you have multiple projects with the same team of people. Okay, this is the one where the authorship I'm second. This is the one where, I'm first. And so it can help you with, I really need to focus on the one where I'm first because that's the one where I need to be prioritizing, or having a conversation and saying, okay, I'm prioritizing this other one. Maybe we should flip authorship because this is the one that I'm really contributing more. So it can serve as an opportunity for conversation, but also just helps make sure everybody's on the same page. And then when it changes, everybody knows, right? So if you're not the main person on that paper, maybe you're last author and you see the first two authors flip, you can know that that's happening and maybe say, hey, why did that happen? And, does that influence, my contributions?
Sorry, we're just distracted by Punya and his woodpecker.
Yeah, he's been banging away outside. I had to go and he just flew off.
It's more likely a cactus wren than it is a woodpecker.
Okay, well, I am not up to date with my birds, clearly. We used to have a lot of them in Michigan. I mean, massive holes in our, we've got all these owls and things to, sometimes they work, sometimes they didn't. I think the owls would creep me out more because they'd be like dangling there, this massive owl sort of slowly turning in the breeze, and I'd be mowing the lawn and I'd have the sense that somebody's staring at me. And it's something I had put up there. It's very weird. Anyway, sorry. I had to step away for a second there.
I liked your comment, Punya, though, about having that trusting relationship. I think that makes these conversations a lot easier. And also things do change. And so the flexibility, and I also I think that's true too, in being strategic about who's going up for promotion. That's important, kind of to keep in mind. And I'm always willing to say, listen, you take this first, I'll go on the next. Like, I know that, especially if it's in a trusted writing relationship with colleagues, that there will be more papers.
Right.
And, and I'm not going to split hairs over it because it's just like the relationship. It's like relationship first, task second. So that's kind of how
I think, and I've talked about this before, like that writing relationship with Matt was clearly one of my most enjoyable, beyond sort of the friendship that developed with Matt, most productive. And partly was, I think he gets a lot of credit because I remember the first time we wrote together, he shared a draft with me because I had this thing about like, before I would share a draft, it would have to be at least in some shape and form because I felt like I would be judged if I shared something which was like janky, right? And the first draft he shared with me was like so bad. And I was like, he's okay sharing that with me. And that I think just opened us up because then it would be like, and we had this thing of like, you're not going to work more than 2 hours on a draft. And so our papers go through like 30 iterations, but at no point has either of us spent more than a couple of hours, and we had this file naming convention. And so you'd immediately know who had worked on it last, what the version number was, and it would just go back and forth because this is pre-Google Doc days, right? And so we were working on Word and just shipping drafts back and forth. And I remember showing this to my kids actually, because, like writing college essays or whatever, they'd be like, how many times do I have to revise this? And I'd show them this folder of like 27 versions that Matt and I have gone back and forth on one paper. And they're like, 27 times? Like, yep, that's what it takes sometimes to get it to say what you want it to say. So yeah, I think that the trust piece is critical.
I really like that example, Punya, because I was sitting here thinking, what contributes to that trust? I mean, how do you build that, and how does it evolve over time? Because if you're starting out the first time with someone, in fact, how did you two start writing together initially? I forget that.
So, Matt started after I did at MSU, and I was on the search committee that hired him, and I disliked him at first sight. He had a ponytail, he had earrings, I don't know what it was. And if I had my way, he would have never gotten the job. Luckily, the search committee was wiser than me, hired him. And we had like a little bit of a tension right in the beginning, because we were both assistant professors and both working in the same area. But then we started talking, and he had his own line of work, which was around sort of video, teachers and video about their practices. I had my line of work, which was around sort of social media, not social media, but people's responses to technology, psychological responses to technology. And we said, there's a third thing that we can do, which is around this teachers and technology, which doesn't impact either of our own areas, but this way we can get more things going, get more things published. And we didn't know then that would actually become the major piece. I don't think he does anything around the video stuff anymore. I don't do anything around the psychological responses to media anymore. And we've both moved on in our research, that's fine. But that period where we worked together, that became an amazing, like generally fantastic experience for us. And I think I always give him a lot of credit for that first draft that he shared with me, because to me, it was like, he is fine sharing a really bad draft and understanding that I will then build on it and then he will build on that. And I think that first move on his part, I always credit because he didn't let his ego get in the way. And to the point where I remember we used to sit and like squabble over stuff, and people would come by and they'd say like, you're like an old married couple. Because that's like how we were. We would just like go after each other. The other thing that Matt has, which is an amazing ability, is we would argue about something for a while. And then he would say something like, oh, you're right. I was wrong. I was thinking of it wrong. And by then I was so invested in the argument, I would be like, you can't do that. We are still fighting. And he'd be like, no, you're right. I'm like, no, Matt, you can't do that. I'm angry now. And I'm invested in this battle. You can't just give up. But again, showed to me that one can be really passionate about your ideas, but also be able to step back from it, and that it's not you. And I've taken that, when I work with grad students, one of the first things I tell them is that I would rather get a shoddy draft from you than you put in a lot of effort into something, and then we decide we're going to go in a different direction. Dana has some stories about that, she'll tell you, where she would like work to perfect a piece, and then I would look at it, I'm like, what we talked about, I've changed my mind. I think it should go some other way. It's like, but I spent 2 weeks on this. Sorry, we're going to go some other way. So yeah, that happens. But I think that conversation with doc students, and it takes them a while to accept that, because they see what they sent you as being like a measure of themselves. Well, it's not, right? It's a first draft of ideas, and the final thing is going to be what is going to be the thing. It's not the drafts along the way. And that's often hard for students to see that. So that way, like my student who graduated from here a couple of years ago, Melissa Warr, she was amazing. She got that very quickly. And so she would send me stuff like first drafts of thoughts And we would go back and forth. I mean, there are some papers we've written, it's like 2 years in the making, because we just kept going back and forth, trying to figure out what it is that we were trying to truly say. It was in the process of conversation that emerged.
With writing, Punya made me think too, Elizabeth Kozlowski and Alfredo used to tell us that they would do the same thing before Google Docs, right? So which way did it go? Elizabeth is a morning writer, so she would write all morning long, and then she would send whatever she did to Alfredo, and he wrote all night long and sent it back to her, and she'd write in the morning. And then they said that's how they turned out so many papers, because they were on opposite brain schedules and writing schedules, and they just continued to send whatever was written, and the other person would edit it and send it back and keep on going till it was done.
Cool. So we have covered saying no, standard responses to standard questions, authorship. Another big thing that we do is around teaching. That's a huge part of our lives. What are some tricks that you've learned along the way that help you do that? I was curious.
That helped me teach?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, know how to use the technology and know what technologies are available to you.
All right.
You know, one of the things I use extensively is a text expansion utility. Does everybody know what that is? So can you let me share the screen?
Sure. Let's see, share screen. Yeah, you should be able to.
All right, so I'll just demonstrate this with, I'm just going to demonstrate this with, can you see my 2 panes here? Did I share the right screen? Hold on a sec. having a
It looked like one was black. Just was it supposed to be black?
Okay, that was the right thing. So what I've got here on the right hand or on the left hand side, this is a utility I use extensively called Text Expander. And on the right here, I've just got a text window so you can see how this works. And I'm going to use a pool of existing snippets. But what I do is I build these snippets against my rubric. So if I wanted to build commentary to a student, I can just say, let's see, we were talking about no earlier. So EM, what is it? NOCO is what I type in there. And in this particular case, it uses variables, and I can put some stuff in here and it'll just build the whole thing. So what I can do is when I'm grading assignments, because of the volume of students I have, I can actually just, let's see, I can actually just build a whole commentary. Let me go to another one here.
With Star Wars quotes in there, I like that.
So I can, let's see, what did I use on this one? I used to speak English at some point, but students have been wearing me down. So I can do that. And then, I can say, oh, let's, tell them this.
Is this in a software called Text Expander? Is that what it is?
Yeah, this is a software called Text Expander. I think the annual licensing fee I pay for it is about $40. But the advantage of this one is you can share these snippets with your colleagues. You can make them public. So, a couple of people who I routinely teach with, my FAs and my AAs, they have this too. So we share like snippets for APA. Here's an APA one. So
this is a Chrome plugin. Is that what it is? I'm just looking at it here.
No, it's a freestanding application.
Okay.
And what it does is you create we'll go in. So you create the snippet. This is the text you want to insert. And then you assign it a code. So down here, I don't know if you can see it, it's grayed out, but it's like semicolon APA headings. So if I type in semicolon APA headings, it'll put in this whole sentence. But it also takes variables. So when I'm building my courses and I want to, when I'm building my courses and I want to like insert announcements to remind students that assignments are coming due, I can just do that. And fill all this stuff out. So I'm just going to accept the defaults, and it'll basically just plug all this code into Canvas. And I can put like all the 40 announcements that are generally in my courses at the start of the semester. I can put those in about 20 minutes, as opposed to the design team manually all typing them in.
Wow. Yeah, so I'm seeing that there is a bunch of Chrome extensions as well, which you can use for this.
Yeah, there's also another one called aText. That's not quite as pretty. It's like $5.
Nice. Wow.
So, I mean, that's one of the ways that I'm able to spend more time with my students is by really making these like the administrivia, automating as much administrivia as I can.
Yeah, I like this, Steve. I've just been like, I have a notepad of like where I'm like changing everything, but this is much more automated, which is nice.
Yeah. And like I said, the nice part is, you can share these collections with your colleagues if you want. So it also handles variables and can do some date math. So, if you're trying to tell a student, yeah, you can have an extension because of sales. It'll look at the current day and then add 3 days or whatever you want. So it'll do all of that. So it is really extremely helpful in developing the courses before they go out the door. And it's also really helpful in building commentary for students. What I do is I line these snippets with my rubrics. So if the first, thing in the rubric says, you're going to include all of the relevant information provided by the stakeholder, then there's two things. It does this thing called optional text where you can kind of check off a checkbox and then it'll appear. So I have like a series of checkboxes. They either did or didn't do that in the rubric, and it includes a snippet that says you either did or you didn't do it. So it allows me to build, feedback and commentary to the students really fast. And then general at the end, I include some kind of personal thing and call them out by name. But it just, like I said, just automating the administrivia, especially in Canvas, is really just incredible. That is just an incredible time suck.
How many students do you typically have, Steve? Just curious.
One of my classes is generally between 100 and 120.
Wow. So this is a significant saving of time for you then.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing with Text Expander too is because it's partially web-based, it gives you you can go to your account and see how much time you save that month. And you save, I mean, you're like, oh, it's only going to save me 3 seconds. But you know what? Those 3 seconds begin to add up when you got a couple hundred people you're dealing with.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Thank you. That is awesome.
Here's the other one. I actually used this in the applied project course when Sean Beatty helped me teach a couple of semesters ago, and he really thought it was a huge time saver.
Thank you.
So this one here, aText, it's not as elegant, but it does essentially the same thing.
Wow, thanks. Yeah, these are really helpful.
Yeah, that's great, Steve, because like you can't create more time in the day, but if you're finding yourself doing stuff over and over, I like that tagline of stop wasting time on repetitive work. So,
yeah, I mean, like your method is good, but cutting and pasting is labor.
Yeah, I'm pretty quick, but I think I might have to invest in this, and then you can share the ones you've already created.
And then there are some public ones also, that people create. So like there's a public one for APA text. So you don't even have to create it. You can just, subscribe to the public one, and whatever changes he makes show up in your account.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Nice. Thank you.
Really cool. Wow. I think we all need a whole session just on technologies.
Clarin, I have the link up there, textexpander.com. That was the first one.
Yeah, these will go into the notes for the just an hour session. That'll be, the recording will be uploaded to YouTube. So in case you didn't catch any of these, they'll be there for future reference, I think.
Yeah, they'll be in the
Yeah.
the notes below the YouTube video. So we will have all these links on there. So
Yep. Yeah. So great. We really covered a lot of ground.
I have a quick question. I've heard of people who are using sort of speech to text to draft either emails or draft first drafts of their ideas for papers. Does anybody here do that? I've thought about whether I should or not, but I've never really jumped into it. Steve, you do it?
I use it in a couple of different ways. One way I use it is I have a piece of software that runs on my Mac called Loopback, and it essentially lets you create virtual cables, as it were. So what I can do is I can route the output of a YouTube video, for example, to this dictation engine. So in cases where I need to get a transcript for a video for a course or something, I will use that tool, run it through Dictate, which is a desktop app I use, and then send that off to the learning design team, and then they'll go through it and edit it and things. I also use it for creating rough drafts or commentary to students or things. It's the one I use is called Dictate. It's a fairly let's see here. It's a fairly vanilla looking thing. It doesn't look like much, but then you route the input of your mic to it, and you can start talking, and it's going to transcribe what you say, period. You have to say the punctuation, comma, so that it takes it and inserts it into the text, period. And then you can go on and edit this after the fact, period, new paragraph, and that works fairly well. It's gotten to be pretty good. So this is a Mac one. There are similar ones on PCs. I haven't used one of those lately, but they are getting more and more accurate. Kind of the gold standard for this is drag and dictate, but it's pretty expensive. I think it's in the hundreds of dollars. It's like $500 or something. And to get it to actually do almost 100% recognition, you have to use their microphone that you buy from them also, which I think is some kind of super special microphone. I've seen one of my medical practitioners use it, and the accuracy is pretty good. But in terms of just not having to type this all out, this is pretty good. It does a pretty good job. It's fairly accurate. You're going to go through here and edit it anyway. What I really use this for is when I'm writing scripts for course videos, because talking it out, speaking it, provides a different context than if you were to sit down and write it. And that context creates a higher level of engagement for the students. And so those are the reasons I use it, because I'm lazy. I never learned to type. And my keyboard, makes it look like I forgot how to speak English at some point, because it's old enough now that it's having some issues.
So I know people are actually using Google Docs. Google Docs now lets you auto transcribe, and people are using that to just get their outline of their ideas down before they actually start digging in and writing papers and stuff that way. So that's one. But I have a funny story with Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is many years ago they came out with an iPhone app which was free. So we got it, and I was sort of playing with it, and it would totally not be able to handle my accent because there are traces of the Indian accent in there. And this is hilarious. It's like my kids were there, who of course grew up in the US and have like Midwestern Michigan accents. They would say the same thing and it would get it 100% correct. And I would say it and it would throw out garbage, which I thought was like really funny. I think it's gotten better now, but this was like the early version. This is like many years ago because the kids were little back then. And they just got a kick out of it because they'd say, Papa, say this. And I would say it and it would come up with some, get 50%, another half of it would be just garble. Just funny. But I think the technology has come a long way now.
Yeah, Google voice typing works pretty well too. I I just rely on this app now because I found it to be slightly more accurate because it's not going out over the wire. You know, it's not going out over VoIP.
Right. So we are over our just an hour. I didn't even realize that till I just
good catch. Yeah. So, great conversation, folks. Yeah. I guess we'll just wrap up by saying what? Enjoy the break if you have a break. Yeah. And see you in 2 weeks, we hope. Right? Anything to add, Punya or Clarin?
No, thank you, and have a great weekend, and hopefully a little bit of a relaxed fall break, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. But thank you all for joining in. It was always fun, and we are enjoying it. I can just say that.